Hello everyone, welcome back to Aurelia City in City Skylines. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you watch the previous episode, which was a showcase of everything we did recently on the other side of the river, the side with the airport. It also showcased some of the old areas on the downtown side of the river to refresh our memory of the place, because the downtown is where we are returning to today. Right in the core of the city, there are still some places that are empty. In this episode, I'd like to focus on the block right next to the main train station. We will continue with some already tried styles. We will do more high-density, vertical stuff, detailing, and trams. So let's go. So this place is going to be quite interesting because we have some different elevations that I would like to kind of continue in this area. And there are quite a lot of them. There are some of the tracks that are going right under the main train station. So those are the tram tracks. There was a bit of a mess at this point when it comes to the intersections for all the different lines, really, around or next to the main train station. There are quite a lot of lines, and I kind of want to separate them. So I decided to actually extend one line that goes directly from the river below some of the blocks and below the train station. I want to continue it at pretty much the same elevation directly through this place. And it actually just so happens that this elevation is the same elevation as the pond that we have in front of the train station. If you remember that, that's like episode 5 or something. We have done that really, really long time ago. You know, those tiered ponds that are going from the train station area, and they have all those residential places right next to them. I think I was kind of talking about this in the showcase episode last time when I said that we are going to revisit this style and continue with that in some different places. So that's exactly what this is going to be all about. But apart from that place, this one is actually going to have the trams tied to the, I don't know how to say that, to the main elements of the place. So that's going to be the pond here, or a stream, a river, however you want to call it. And the tracks are just going to go like this. So you could have probably seen that I did some extensive landscaping in this area. So this place is going to be significantly sunken below the original terrain level, which is going to allow us to do some nice verticality in this area. So this is going to be some sort of a valley with buildings on both sides of this canal. Yeah, canal is probably the best word for this. And it's just going to be like a valley. It's going to have some residential buildings on one side and some commercial or offices on the opposite side. And it's kind of gradually going to increase in density, and it's just going to become some kind of like a high density mess, you know, when it's going to reach those top levels and the main streets around this block, right? So right now I'm just preparing the infrastructure. The road that has the elevated road that goes above this place is not going to be there eventually. That's just a remnant that I had there. Originally, I planned this entire block to be like a park, you know, completely just covered with trees or something. But I really wanted to have those tram tracks just extended into this area. I suppose that this planning ties to the changes on the map that I'm advertising for forever at this point, that I really want to do another like major changes to the map, and this kind of ties to it because I was also thinking about how I'm going to extend some of the lines, public transport lines, especially the trams, because they are kind of converging to the train station, but only from the side of the river. I had no connections or no preparations made for extending it past the train station. So this is kind of like part of it, or at least some small part of it. Anyway, this tram line is actually going to terminate here. You can see that the elevation is just huge. You know, the difference is just too big to create some sort of tracks that would eventually reach back to the surface. That's just not possible, really. I would have to do some kind of loops maybe, but that doesn't really seem right. So this line is actually going to terminate here, and for a good reason. I don't really want to spoil it too much how the map changes are going to be, but let's just say that we are kind of close to the edge of the city in here, all right? That's all I'm going to say at this point. So this line is actually going to terminate here. It's going to have like an underground depot that I'm not going to show that much because it's kind of like a mess. It's like a fake depot. Well, it's actually going to be a functional depot, proper depot building, but it's going to be hidden underground. I really want to have just a tunnel entrance in there, and that's going to be it. When I'm going to do the tram line, first person rides on this particular line is just going to end right before it enters the underground, right? Because there's going to be just a loop, nothing else. All right, so that's just the explanation for the infrastructure, but let's just now more focus on what I'm actually building here. By the way, yeah, these are the tracks, and this is the entrance underground. That's just going to form a loop. I'm not really going to show it too much. I started using those Green Cities vanilla, yes, vanilla, you heard right, buildings in here. So these are actually vanilla buildings. They look absolutely amazing. And what's best about them is that they have these different models, different heights for different levels of the buildings. I almost forgot the word there, level, because I don't really use vanilla zoning, so I'm not really sure how this works, but these Green Cities buildings are absolutely amazing. I already used them actually in that little island there with that tower, you know, back in the distance. Again, long time ago. So there is some continuity in here in regards to the building styles. I was kind of against the Green Cities DLC when it first came out because I thought it's not exactly something I will need. But it has lots of these high-tech or futuristic-looking buildings that are really high quality. I was really pleasantly surprised when I finally opened that tab in Find It to just look at some of these. I think these are the Echo residential buildings or something like that. Anyway, these buildings are just the corner buildings, kind of like a 1/4 elliptical shaped buildings. But I obviously just used 4 instances to create this full ellipse, right? The shape, the footprint. And like I said, they come in different heights based on the building level. And they also have different detailing on the roofs, especially different coloring, maybe even different configurations of the windows, something like that. But it felt absolutely perfect to just use this pack and create some sort of a fairly large area where just one instance, or not one instance, but one style of buildings is going to be used just over and over again. So this place I'm really satisfied with. It's definitely the highlight of this project today, and I really like how it turned out. It's obviously super high density. You might argue that maybe some of these buildings don't get enough sunlight or something, but I'm thinking that a lot of the apartments in these buildings are kind of large, like very large, and it's just living in the center of the city. So usually people probably don't really spend that much time inside of these apartments because they are just doing something inside the city, just walking around or just visiting some places or something like that. So overall it's just a nice looking area. Obviously the apartments that are higher in these buildings are just a bit better than the ones in the first floors, especially in these buildings inside those little streets. But that's just how it is with any kind of high density projects, really. So that's just how it is. Doesn't really matter that much. Anyway, that's the rough shape of these buildings done, and now I have the very difficult task of matching all these different elevations and making it look just more natural, if you can even say it at this point. But just do this detailing that's just going to match these levels. Yeah, that's no more to that. So we already had some kind of preparations here done in regards to some retaining walls and stuff, but I still need to do some more of these transitions, some kind of network walls and props and stuff. And I finally decided that I'm just going to create this line of these buildings, and they are themselves going to form like a retaining wall, really. Difference between the lowest level of the valley and this original terrain level. And it's just going to be like a green line separating the buildings from that little decorative island, the commercial island. I'm not really sure how to call it, the one, the structure on the right here. And it's just going to have some pedestrian connections, for these buildings, because there is tram station again for a different line, so people can, for example, arrive here and just walk through the little park into these homes. And I assume that there are going to be some connections. If this was real life, I suppose there would be some kind of elevator connections through the buildings, so that even if you are not living in those houses, you can just take the elevators to the lowest level of the valley and enter some different structures, or just walk through it if you just want to do some shopping, maybe in the mall in the valley. By the way, the mall, I haven't really commented it on, I haven't really mentioned it that much, but that's the World Center, I think it's called. It's like a pack of 6 buildings, I think, in the workshop. They are huge. They are very huge buildings, and obviously if you combine all 6 of them, how they're supposed to be combined, then it's just a massive structure, and I really like how it looks like. I had it downloaded for forever, really. I think right from the start of the series. I might have even had it in Rockdale back in the day, but I never used it before because I was just waiting for a suitable place in the city. I think I was considering it for that shopping mall area, the one by the river that I showed in the showcase episode last time. But finally, I decided to put it right here, and it's a perfect spot for it. You kind of need to have like a wide open area in front of it, so that's that check that we have that in here, and you don't really need to use the back buildings, but because you can just incorporate it into some high density messy blocks that I'm doing right here, right? So I had some couple of buildings already prepared here from back in the day, but I just reorganized it a lot. And even that elevated road that just goes into this area, I was thinking it's going to be like an access road to some, I don't know, elevated places in these blocks. But eventually I just decided it's going to be maybe like an entrance into that into the entire shopping area, or maybe it might be like a resupply road. It's usually in real life when you are doing some kind of resupplying, you are entering the basement of some kind of shopping centers, but this time I just decided that the resupply road is going to go from the top, because I already had that road there, so I just needed to find some justification for it. So I just put that wide parking lot road in there, and I'm not really sure if I did it or not, but I suppose I put like a fake door on the side of that building, so it's really going to look like people or cars, trucks, I suppose, can enter the shopping mall from above. And then I did all kinds of different buildings. I actually used some of the vanilla unique buildings to just merge them into the World Center structure on the front. So it eventually just forms this huge chunk of structures, really, and I really like how it looks like. And you can see how I'm also using smaller buildings here and there to kind of cover some edges and do something like that. Anyway, here right in front of the train station, or next to the train station, or next to the side of this valley, or end of the valley, I'm not really sure how to explain it, it's a bit difficult at this point, but I need to have some edge here. We obviously need to have, again, some kind of transition to the original level where the main avenue is, the avenue that goes between this valley and the train station. Yes, that's probably the most descriptive way. And I just decided to use these buildings to create like a row of these buildings. Very, very similar approach to what I did with those elliptical structures just a minute ago. And in here we also need to have some kind of a tunnel entrance for the trams. So I decided to do exactly the same approach, use the same building in here, convert it into procedural objects, and either just move it higher or just cut some of the first floors away from it, and then polish these edges with these retaining walls, with these concrete walls, very nice looking concrete walls. And I think I later put some lights in there or something like that. I think I was doing this on the live stream, I'm not really sure. Anyway, one important thing was obviously putting water into the canals. By the way, if you are struggling with putting water in these canals, make sure that you are actually going to lower the terrain inside the canal to the bottom of the canal. Otherwise, you will not be able to put the water source in there, because the canal doesn't really lower the terrain. I'm not really sure how it technically works in the coding, I suppose, but When it comes to putting the water sources, the game doesn't really notice that the terrain is lowered by the canal, so you actually have to do it manually. But that's just like a tiny detail that I had to do with all of these canals. We have to cover some of this vertical space even more, because these buildings that I used here are short. They are actually not tall enough. That kind of tells you more about the differences in elevation here, but these buildings are just not tall enough to cover the entire vertical distance for that main avenue road on the surface. So I decided to do some kind of a platform on top of these buildings. That's going to be like a middle level, and there might be some shops or something, like a gallery of shops, maybe some benches, tables for restaurants, and it's just going to be like a viewing area of this entire place. I really wanted to also not do like a continuous line of some high-rise buildings right next to that main avenue on the edge of this valley, so that if you are walking on that main avenue, you might actually see down into this valley, So it's going to be kind of more open. It's not going to be completely enclosed, like a inner yard or something like that of this block, right? So there are going to be some places slightly more open, even though this place is obviously super high density anyway. By the way, I'm not going to finish this entire place today, because next episode I would like to do something about the train station. We are right next to it. I would like to kind of revisit it, and then we are going to return to this valley and do the second part of it on the opposite side of the canal, because at this point I wasn't exactly sure how I want to do it, so I kind of wanted to take some time to think about it some more, and eventually it's going to look really, really good. It's obviously going to have the similar style, but it's going to be, again, just some kind of a wall of buildings forming the transition between the levels. So this is the top level of this platform. It's just going to be grass. I really didn't want to have all of these places just covered with some pavement or concrete or something. It wouldn't exactly look good with colors. And below the top level, below the top platform, I decided to put these shop windows. These are copied directly from that river plaza from some time ago. If you remember, we did that plaza with the tiny stream that joins the main river, and I used exactly those procedural object shop windows in there underneath the railing, exactly the same style as before. It kind of felt fitting to do it in this place. There are also these different connections between the places. You could have also seen me do like a little cutout for like a path through those buildings down below here. I haven't really connected that, but I'm thinking that I'm going to connect it to the train station directly, so pedestrians can actually go below into this tunnel and just go into the train station, or go below the train station into different places of the downtown. So this place eventually is going to be quite walkable. You could easily just walk through this area, obviously up and down a bit, but you don't really need to use cars. Obviously, there is no car infrastructure down here. That's kind of important to mention that I suppose if you had a car and wanted to live in this place, you would have to enter some garage around this place. But down below in this valley, there are zero cars. There are only the pedestrian roads and trams, public transport. And by the way, the trams, I should mention, they do not have the wires, the cables, the overhead cables, because they would just not work with the visuals of this place. So I decided to just think of them as like battery operation in this area, or something like that. So doing just some final adjustments to this area and kind of preparing for some detailing. So doing some changes to these roads, for example, using some elevated segments here and there over the water, heavily using the node controller actually to kind of manipulate the edges of these transitions, to really have them highly customized and fitting all these different curvatures and shapes. So that definitely is a mod that enabled some of these features that I'm doing right here. Also, there are going to be 2 tram stations in here. One is going to be directly in front of that World Center, the shopping center, and another one is going to be between those elliptical residential buildings, right before the trams enter the loop tunnel that I did earlier. All right. So, just two stations kind of close to each other. It's not like people really need to use the public transport to move around this place, but obviously the trams are more intended to bring people either away from this place, just into different parts of the city entirely, or obviously the other way around. But people can easily just walk around this place or walk into different parts of the downtown on their own, or even just use the pedestrian tunnels and elevators and all kinds of connections to reach the main train station or different tram stops all around this neighborhood, right? So it's not exactly that necessary to have like a super high capacity public transport option in this place. I know that people commented a couple of times before that Aurelia is kind of lacking like a very high density, very high capacity public transport option. And that's, I suppose, a bit true. The city is quite large for just the trams to be going around the downtown. And partially, it's also because of aesthetics, I suppose, because in City Skylines, in the series, in the videos, it's just looking much better when I have the trams running on the surface. If I had some kind of a metro system underground, then what's the point, right? It's just hidden underground. I wouldn't be able to really show it, and I wouldn't just have the satisfaction of having the vehicles move nicely on the tracks on the surface. So that's why this decision was made to really only do the trams. I really don't want to do metros, even in Altengrad or any other series that I'm going to plan in the future, because there's just nothing to see, right? That's the entire justification for that. But I definitely agree that maybe more capacity transport options would be a bit more realistic. But, it's Aurelia. It's not like it's a realistic city anyway, all right? I'm doing some pedestrian connections between the buildings. I was actually pleasantly surprised that citizens in the game only require the pedestrian paths to reach the residential buildings. Obviously, some service vehicles will not be able to reach those, but I don't really mind that too much. Most important thing is that people are using the buildings. Citizens are actually walking to the tram stations, using the trams, and just walking around the place, making it look more alive. So that's the most important thing. Had a bit of a problem with choosing the right surfaces. Eventually, I chose this like a Pokeball planter shape in here because I'm doing all kinds of planter shapes and I'm kind of running out of ideas, to be honest. But I really didn't want to have this place completely grass. I just wanted to have it this gravel surface. It's looking rather okay for this area, kind of futuristic, and some kind of planter shapes. So pretty much exactly the same thing I did with that second tram station, where I just did the larger planter, kind of matching the shapes of the outlying buildings. Putting some trees here and there, lots of flowers. I was actually paying quite close attention to how this place is going to look like from the first person view of the tram. And that's why I'm not really putting a lot of very tall trees, especially around the tracks. Because if you think about it, when the tram is going to leave this tunnel from below the main train station, it's going to enter this place, and I really want you to have the view of this entire area so that you can appreciate it just as you exit the tunnel. And obviously, if there were some tall trees, then that's not exactly how it could work. Anyway, these are the cinematics of the finished thing. And as you can see, this place is huge, like vertically huge. This shopping mall is just looking really good. I really like that. I think it's like a exhibition center, vanilla exhibition center building that's on the top of that world center. You can hardly tell that they are different buildings. They are very similar in the styles and shapes, so it really fits together. This, like I said, this is probably one of my favorite places of this general area, actually, because these buildings just look very, very nice. I was super surprised that the Green Cities DLC are going to fit Aurelia this much. And I even didn't mind the detailing on the roofs. It was actually very fitting, so very nice. And I didn't even change the colors on the buildings. These are just the random colors that the buildings just get when you plop them down, because it just fits. It just really fits the city. This is the part on the top, which is that little park, the divisive line between that other high-density part and this valley structures. We have some pavement on the sides of that road, right to the right there. but otherwise it's just nicely fitting together. Some more connections, vertical connections. I don't think I showed it, but as you can see, I put some streetlights here and there. I was using those very nice futuristic streetlights that have those very organic shapes. I was using the shapes that have the 3 lights in all directions, kind of. So that's just overall looking really, really good. Like I said, we are not going to finish this place in today's episode. Obviously, we can see that because the second half of it is going to be for some other episode. I do have some residential buildings in mind for that place, and that's going to nicely finish this entire valley. I'm not really sure how to call it. I suppose it's just the valley. I will have to think about it for the title of the video. As you can see, it nicely fits even with the rest of the city. So these high density blocks are pretty much exactly the same that we have on the other side of all these main streets. So just a mess of these high density buildings gradually transitioning into this kind of more planned layout of the valley below, right? We can also see the crater in there, which is fairly similar style. That is almost all for today. As always, if you liked this video and want to help it reach more people, you can click the thumbs up button, write a comment, share it, and if you're new here, you can subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new episodes. Also, if you want to directly support the channel, you can become a channel member through the join button below or the link in the video description. Big thanks to all the current members. And one last thing, I'm doing weekly live streams on Twitch, so if you are interested in that, check out the Twitch link also in the description. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next episode from Aurelia, where we will revisit the main train station itself, do some refurbishing, make the tracks better looking, and so on. Have a nice week, take care, and goodbye.